The year was 1811, and while the Prince Regent dabbled in politics and pugilism, mere mortals like you and me dawdled with day-to-day deeds, the art of staying clean, for instance. Regency England was a time ripe with literary elegance, yet oddly, not one with an abundant use of effervescent bubbles. Picture, if you will, our ancestors grappling with the curious notion of cleanliness, where sniffs of lavender water battled valiantly against the olfactory assaults of unwashed stockings. An era known for its impeccable social graces and sartorial flourishes, one might assume that Regency folks wallowed in bathtubs of sparkling water while rereading the latest of Miss Austen's musings. Alas, they often played a game more akin to, "How long can I keep this cravat clean?" than indulging in full-fledged bubble baths. Now, let us visit a typical morning in 1811. Our subject, Mr. Thomas Trundleworth, not a name you'd find in Austen's esteemed pages perhaps, but a man nonetheless unique in his cleanliness convictions. Unlike his peers who may entertain a bath once a year, thrice if blessed by good fortune, or cursed by a nosy neighbour, Mr. Trundleworth was notorious for his novel idea of thrice-weekly wash sessions. Peculiar chap indeed, with water fetched laboriously from the nearest well and heated until it was as warm as one might dare hope. Mr. Trundleworth would perform his ritual scalding task in his wooden tub, vigilant lest he waste that limited supply. Frugal were the days when faces were washed without the company of a soap, and hair saw less water than most houseplants. In truth, Britain during this time basked far more in the fragrance of pomade and rosewater than in the splash of errant droplets. The upper crusts of society donned powdered wigs with aplomb. Hair washing was a delicate business, largely agreements between social conventions and one's personal catastrophe, armed with nothing more than a dash of lavender water and good intentions. Linen shirts, in their own right, played the heroic part of absorbing bodily betrayals only to be cast into anonymity in the wash basket. Laundry days were less about cleanliness and more about necessity, a bitter feud between character and carbon. Our playful Mr. Trundleworth, brochure writer of practices avant-garde, ventured to soak his linens more often, believing perhaps that the gentle patter of rainy days would aid his efforts. But hark, here comes a twist, like an unexpected plot turn in a Gothic novel. The invention of the bidet. Ah, the innovation that scandalized the British. Although designed to mimic a small commode, it was progressively appropriated by affluent Brits with a sense of mischief to purportedly aid their personal hygiene. Yet one would note these intriguing instruments more likely adorned drawing rooms than anyone's daily routine. Social customs often choreographed the dance of hygiene, angular and staid. Saturday nights earmarked for ablutions in the home of a most devoted washerman would have the town populace in fits. And beyond personal endeavours, one might find public bathhouses steaming with gossip as much as with water vapour. These venues sprouted notoriety as centres not just for cleanliness, but perhaps for a clandestine whiff of continental habits. Now, as you, dear listener, nestle further into your pillow, imagine the rustle of flannel and linen sighing into its creases. Reflect on this curiously genteel tale of a time when even cleanliness came with a dash of wit. Soon, we will journey from baths to a story laced with powder and lace, like a gentle page of a forgotten romance. If these stories help you drift off, please subscribe to the channel. It would mean the world to me. And before you fully fade into dreamland, I would love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there. In the Regency era, when empire waistlines were in vogue and gentlemen sported dashing cravats, the matter of bathing was quite literally a murky one. As the moonlight twinkles over ballrooms and the sound of classical overtures waltzes through the air, one might be tempted to believe that this period was an exemplar of elegance and cleanliness. However, let's not get ahead of ourselves. If one were to peer behind the silk curtains, a different tale of cleanliness, or lack thereof, would quietly unfold. Bathing, you see, was not exactly the most frequent of pastimes. Indeed, in the early 19th century, cleanliness was more of a notion than a steadfast practice. The idea of bathing every day would likely be considered most extravagant, perhaps even scandalous. Water, after all, was a precious commodity, much like an invitation to the Duchess of Devonshire's soiree. Instead, most people considered a brisk rub with a damp cloth more than adequate, opting to focus on the more visible areas. A quick once-over that one might call the Regency rinse. As you slip deeper into this narrative, imagine yourself meandering through a grand manor where Harrington the butler would oversee a most ceremonious affair just to prepare a bath. The family might summon the household staff to boil what could only be described as a comical amount of water to fill a fashionably robust copper tub. This Herculean task was often reserved for the wealthiest, but even among the elite, a full immersion could be a rarity. The less fortunate bathed even less frequently, brushing off the idea as a whimsical pursuit akin to catching a stray sunbeam in a bottle. For those venturing into creative alternatives, there were the dry baths of yore, a quaint little ritual involving fragrant powders to mask any aromas garnered through one's natural atmospheres. Imagine a flour mill having a tête-à-tête with a perfumery, leaving you dusted like a beignet at a Parisian cafe. Such methods were often deemed civil enough for public appearances, lest anyone faint from a confrontation with an unrefined whiff. Nevertheless, should someone have been inspired by a particularly zealous streak, or perhaps a fancy pamphlet urging the benefits of water for health, the bath itself became a social event. For instance, the grand spa towns like Bath, aptly named for its association with the pampering pursuit, offered what we might today call a wellness retreat. Aristocrats flocked to these watering holes, not only to cleanse but to socialize, hoping to rejuvenate their reputations along with their complexions. However, one must consider the home remedies practiced behind closed doors. Take, for example, the legendary Lady So-and-so who swore by an infusion of elderflower to preserve her alabaster skin, or Sir What's-His-Name, who embraced the dreadfully novel approach of cold bathing to shock his constitution into vigor. It is perhaps these peculiar headlines that rendered personal bathing an activity worth discussing in the Regency drawing rooms, only after all the more pressing issues of politics and fashion had been exhausted, of course. Let's not forget, cleanliness was largely connected to what one deemed as hygienic, a concept playing second fiddle to the rules of polite society. As you let your eyelids grow heavy and thoughts wane to whispers, imagine the hushed clatter of chamber pots and the reassuring creak of a heavy wooden floor, with folks exiting grand gatherings, content under layers of lace, cotton, and the occasional whiff of bergamot. In this world of exuberant formality and grandiosity, clandestine bouts of cleanliness subtly enriched the intricate dance of propriety and poise. Drift further into this curious world, where etiquette was as layered as their garb, and let the gentleness of the era tuck you into a dream of discovering more of the unspoken truths of a period so often admired for its refinement and delicacy. Ah, the curious world of Regency England, an era when elegance wafted through the air like a delicate perfume. But cleanliness, seemingly, did not always make the guest list. Welcome to our exploration of bathing habits, or sometimes the lack thereof, in the early 1800s, when an ever so slightly grimy existence was all the rage. Picture yourself stepping into a grand drawing room in a fancy manor, the kind where the walls are draped with silk and the chandeliers glitter like stars. The attendees are sipping tea and nibbling biscuits, their manners as proper as a precisely folded napkin. But beneath the layers of cravat, lace, and powdered wigs lingers the undeniable reality. Many members of this refined audience might not have seen a proper bath in, well, quite some time. Why, you may wonder, was a thorough soaking not a daily ritual for these highborn folks? Was it the lack of availability? The cost? The simple truth is, water was not the constant friend to cleanliness that it is today. For these lovely people of Regency England, the bath was less of a necessity and more of a grand event, akin to a minor holiday, if you will, often carried out with a degree of ritual that rivaled a midsummer ball. Bathing was more typically a tepid affair, quite literally. The concept of a piping hot bath was regarded with suspicion. It was widely believed that dipping oneself into scalding water might lead to any number of dire outcomes, ranging from mental instability to a most inconvenient case of the vapors. Thus, for fear of accidentally boiling themselves like a rather unfortunate egg, many opted for a tepid splash at best. If water wasn't splashing daily across one's delicate skin, how did our Regency ancestors maintain their dignity in close quarters? Well, they relied heavily on a battery of scents and powders to mask and cajole the senses. You see, perfumes were more than mere luxury during this time. They were tactical adornments in a noble's arsenal, designed to battle the olfactory offences of courtly life. Speaking of deployments against those offensive airs, the aristocracy counted on linen shirts and petticoats as their unsung hygge heroes. By frequently changing these undergarments, they attempted to separate person from pong, with mixed results. Washing of clothes happened more regularly than bathing one's actual self. It was thought plastering a fresh layer of fabric barrier was just the puckish ticket to maintaining a semblance of personal hygiene. Public bathhouses did exist for the brave, or perhaps desperate, but their experience was not always the pampered affair one might imagine. These communal cleansing halls were sometimes as crowded as a popular ballroom, and patrons might find themselves waiting in line, jostling cheek by jowl with equally soapy citizens hoping for their turn at the washtub. The bathwater, a twilight shade of uncertain origin by midday, was recycled with a nod towards thriftiness, but not particularly toward hygiene. Indeed, cleanliness had an entirely different definition back then. To be truly clean was to be spiritually pure rather than physically pristine. This notion paired nicely with the complicated contraptions of the day called bathing machines, rolling huts that could be wheeled into the sea, offering privacy to the bather intent on a brisk saltwater dousing. These peculiar devices were the pinnacle of sophistication for the fastidious few who dared to flirt with immersion. And so, in this world of appearances, where masks and delicate charms could deceive the senses, the inhabitants of Regency England carried on with life as a balancing act between refinement and the distinctly human penchant for muddiness. It was a time when a spot of fresh air and a daub of lavender might do quite nicely, thank you, in ensuring continued social harmony. As we turn the page to delve further into this fragrant and convoluted past, let your eyelids grow heavy, casting the shadows of candlelit rooms as a soft blanket over your thoughts. The tale of how these prim and powdered individuals navigated the foggy realities of personal grooming beckons as dreams gently descend. In the midst of Regency England, where fashion was dictated by the ever-dazzling styles of empire waist dresses and cravats that seemed to twist and turn with a mind of their own, there lay an altogether less glamorous affair, the matter of bathing. Our genteel forebearers of the early 19th century approached cleanliness with the same fervour one might reserve for a carriage ride, a leisurely outing, not a daily chore. Picture, if you will, the quintessential English manor with its echoing stone corridors and draughty parlours, all aflutter with gossip and intrigue. It was here, in these grand settings, that the mysterious art of bathing occasionally took place. Unlike today's modern bathroom retreats, resembling mini-spas, the bath of Regency times was a far more exclusive event. A mansion might boast a bathing room if it was exceptionally posh, but often the affair occurred quite modestly in one's bedroom, where a copper tub would be filled dutifully by the silent, choreographed dance of household staff. Now it would be remiss not to mention that the very activity of getting into a bath was rather like enacting a one-act play, entitled Splish Splash in Wondrous Style. The bath oftentimes resembled more of a splash than a soak. One might envision a grand scene where the gracious lady of the house tiptoes into the tepid embrace of a foot of water, feeling rather victorious if the water was lukewarm, for the only radiator known was a roaring fireplace a fair distance away. But pray, let's not forget the soap, that unsung hero of the bathing world, usually an alkaline concoction bold enough to make your skin tingle and perhaps remove the paint from a small table if the need arose. Made from a pleasing combination of animal fat and lye, Soap was tasked with transforming what was perhaps a chore into something resembling a modest affair of modest cleanliness. The curious fragrance of these bars was a thing of wonder or bewilderment, depending on your sensibilities. Fashionable scents might draw from lavender or rosemary, a delightful bouquet unless, of course, cost dictated a soap with a distinctly more industrial aroma. And for those who took scent seriously, a process more akin to alchemy than hygiene, one could enhance one's bath with sachets of herbs and sprigs of flowers, creating a watery potpourri within which the bather might become a human bouquet. Let us pause to delight in the notion of the dining room doubling as a social battleground, cheese and bread navigating airwaves thick with the machinations of matchmaking mothers and brightly attired dandies. The question arises, did they truly notice if the chap across the table had bathed that week or merely dabbed cologne in strategic places? The answer, dear listener, lay not in bathing frequency, but in prowess with the handkerchief, that noble accessory utilized as much for its beauty as for masking unfortunate wafts of nature. Indeed, water itself was often regarded with suspicion, especially in London, where it had an uncanny tendency to be more year-old soup than crystal-clear spring water. With questionable purity, it was often safer to consume a pint of beer or tea, the earthy musk of boiled leaves nearly luring one into believing it was the healthier choice when faced with the tenuous terror of a glass of aquatic ambrosia. Thus, as a modern dweller of homes with gleaming showers and endless warm water, one might find amusement in the care with which our Regency ancestors approached the simple act of cleanliness. Humorously, they managed to keep society bustling and bustling, marriages arranged and gossips simmering, all with the sporadic bemusement of the bath. And as the soft shadows lengthen over the landscape of this quaint era, our journey through the whims and whispers of a time past draws a cozy breath, inviting you to delve further into the folds of history's more droll and somnolent secrets. As the clock ticked forward ever so patiently, we found ourselves nestled in a corner of Regency England that wasn't much given to what one might call frequent bathing. In fact, stepping into the shoes of a typical Regency-era soul might reveal that water, not unlike that elusive midnight snack, was best savoured sparingly. You see, soaking in the tub was viewed with a peculiar mix of skepticism and enthusiasm, akin to trying on a new hat that might, just might, make you look like an eccentric aunt's pet cat. In this whimsical world, frequent bathing was seen by some as a reckless endeavour, much like proposing marriage after a single dance at a grand ball. Spanning from concern about the expiration date on personal health to worry over the dilution of one's essence, whatever that might be, bathing presented its own fascinating reality. Fear not, dear listener, for despite these trepidations, cleanliness was not entirely cast aside. Instead, it simply danced to the genteel rhythm of the times. Let us peek into the washstand, Regency England's trusty stage for personal hygiene dramatics, presenting itself more like an elaborate physics experiment than a simple act of washing. Morning ablutions were usually performed using a quaint basin and ewer set, a deft duo of porcelain or earthenware touring bedrooms across the land. Washstands bore witness to splashes that were more ceremonial than strategic, but with a dab here and a dribble there, the day began with the soft patter of self-assured cleanliness, or, at the very least, the semblance of it. Now, when words like soap began to echo throughout the genteel halls of society, one must imagine a concoction quite different from the fragrant bars of today. Soap was, let's say, a rustic cousin to its modern counterpart. Made from animal fat and lye, it didn't exactly waft charming bouquets. Instead, its fragrance was more faithful to its utilitarian origins. It was not for the faint-hearted or the sensitive-nosed, but it served its purpose with sturdy determination, a bit like a well-meaning, if slightly overzealous footman. Of course, no tale of cleanliness would be complete without a nod to a distinguished figure. Beau Brummel, that renowned arbiter of fashion and elegance. He was a dandy of the highest order, known for his meticulous standards of appearance and for purportedly taking a whole hour, or more, to get dressed each morning. Brummel championed the daily habit of bathing, a dashing eccentricity that caused a ripple of scandalized admiration. When questioned about his routine, he would likely raise an eyebrow and reply that everything, even soap, had its rightful place, cutting quite the heroic figure in the ongoing battle for cleanliness. Yet, let us not mistake the gentle complexity of Regency hygiene for laziness. Humans, ever resourceful, found inventive ways to navigate their odoriferous obstacles. Perfumers practiced their perfume sorcery with aplomb, crafting scents not merely to allure, but to valiantly fend off any whiff of impropriety. A spritz here, a dab there, and voila. One could contend with the social world olfactorily fortified, like a fragrant warrior donned in aromatic armor. As we drift toward our conclusion this eve, imagine those Regency folk slipping between sheets, sometimes cleaned, more frequently aired, and contemplating the triumph that was another day of not entirely being averse to water. They dreamt perhaps of fountains and streams that sang gentle lullabies of cleanliness. For in dreams all things were possible, even a world where bathing was as natural as taking a gentle breath. With this sleepy musing, our quaint journey through the washstands and water basins of yesteryear draws to a soft close. Picture yourself floating down the melody of a softly babbling brook, the tender promise of more curious historical tales awaiting just beyond the horizon as we drift further into the whispers of time past. In the gentle glow of Regency England, you might imagine the landed gentry freshening themselves in a cascade of sparkling brookwater, or perhaps bathing in large tubs of lavender-scented luxury. But alas, dear listener, our expectations must often succumb to the unruly demands of reality. You see, the English bath of the day was more often a peculiar spectacle than an exercise in opulence. Picture, if you will, a grand manor house, resplendent with chintz drapes and a rather excessive number of teapots scattered about the premises. Here, in a dimly lit corner, resides the stately copper tub, gleaming with a solemn dignity, as if aware that it bears the burden of hygiene, or the occasional lack thereof. As luck would have it, the journey of water from the well to the bathing tub was itself an ordeal worth a ballad or two. Arm yourselves, dear listener, in your imagination with fortitude, for the servants were enlisted not just for their nimbleness in carrying trays of tiny sandwiches, but to haul water by the bucketful. This was a Herculean task, requiring brawn, balance, and the dexterity to avoid haphazardly creating unintentional indoor ponds. Once the tub was filled, often with mere inches of water to conserve both time and energy, the bathing ritual could commence. However, the water, having travelled such a weary road, arrived not toasty, but tepid, possibly leaving any notions of relaxed, soothing warmth as chilled as the draughty hallways themselves. Indeed, bathing became an affair fraught with compromise. Ladies would often ingeniously drape small canopies, the Regency version of a shower curtain, from the ceiling for modesty, while gentlemen might have bravely ventured into the tepid waters without such architectural embellishments. The luxury of scented soaps, when it made an appearance, featured prominently. One could almost imagine a negotiator presenting it as a piece, offering to one's nose as it stood vigil against the dampness. On occasion, this entire aquatic dance would take place in a drawing room, much to the scandal or amusement of guests, who would neatly tiptoe around such an intimate spectacle, struggling no doubt to control their wayward glances. Those of the well-heeled society were often content to betroth themselves not to daily baths, but to well-placed perfumes and powders, maintaining both their social status and perhaps outwitting the quaint concept of being soaked to the bone. For the less affluent, the process proved even more of a Victorian comedy. Public baths in bustling towns welcomed all, their air humming with the clamour of community togetherness and a faint whiff of bleach, if you were fortunate. Though unheard of today, communal baths brought about a surprising camaraderie amidst the steamy haze, though one might question the enduring effects on one's personal boundaries. Yet amid such an era of sporadic scrubbing, there emerged a shrewd appreciation for the art of laundering linens and a perfected routine of a genteel affair known as the sponge bath. Such practices combined efficiency with economy, saving time and water, while sparing neither expense on generous applications of heavy-duty scented powders. Reflecting on such rigorous routines, or lack thereof, initiates a moment to ponder the very essence of cleanliness as a virtue. In many ways, it was the Regency's own version of structured chaos, layered garments shielding them from the elements and unwanted olfactory discoveries alike. As we gently close the chapter on Regency bathing customs, our attention may draw us to yet another peculiarity of the times. For what piece of comfort and curiosity lies beyond the parlor doors, teeming with corsets, cravats, and a questionably flavored pudding? We shall delve into this mystery with hushed anticipation, much like a sleuth in a bonnet, eager to uncover societal secrets, whispered in the candle's flickering glow. Picture this: a freshly sunlit morning in Regency England, where the ceiling-high windows of drawing rooms politely bathe posh interiors in dreamy light. Alas, the same cannot be said of the bathers of the day. Cleanliness, like good manners, was enforced by expectation, yet often fell short in practice. And here, dear listener, you find yourself reveling in the curious rituals of personal hygiene from that fragrant era. Let us first peer through the heavy embroidery of what was considered a bathroom back then, a place that was about as common as a compliment from Lady Catherine de Bourgh. For most, the business of actual baths involved the clunky operation of filling a copper or tin tub by hand, rather akin to preparing a giant teapot, but with far more nakedness involved. Water had to be hauled, kettle by kettle, to the bedroom, which doubled as a bathing station, while the temperature teetered between frosty Arctic, plunge and steaming Turkish hammam. Those fortunate enough to possess an actual bathing room faced the social peril of heating an entire space to rival the surface of the sun. Without modern plumbing, one could say it was the era's original hot yoga studio, minus the yoga, plus a lot of hopeful scrubbing. And what of soap, you ask? Ah, the most delightful concoction, exclaims a Regency chemist, waving a concoction whose contents could strip the paint off a footman's livery. Soap in that day and age was handmade and lumpy, often resembling questionably curated lumps of cheese or a loaf of bread that had committed some great transgression. Made from animal fat combined with soda, a fine recipe for those with a particularly strong constitution, it was both scarce and horrifically pungent. Lavender oils and rosewaters attempted to mask the rough fragrance, much like covering a cheese fondue with a spritz of eau de cologne. No tale of Regency bathing secrets would be complete without an acknowledgement of the curious case known as dry washing. This practice, our dear sleep wanderer, did not mean skipping on the rinse cycle, but was a nod to employing powders to cleanse the skin. Imagine a refined dust storm of flour-like powder, enveloping one in a sweet cloud, designed to whip away dirt and grime, and perhaps a bit of dignity while we're at it. Hair care was another grandiose affair. Being well coiffed meant an amusing battle against the ever-elusive oil and stickiness. While natural oils were supposed to work wonders, they also occasionally attracted the odd critter or two, enough to make any socialite inch for the hairbrush. Hair was powdered with the same diligence as a donut at a baker's breakfast spread. Wigs, however, offered a merciful reprise from the intricacies of daily grooming, creating an instant, if somewhat perilous, fix to one's aesthetic woes. In the labyrinth of Regency hygiene, social norms moved in vast circles of confounding paradox. One might possess clothes glistening with the evidence of meticulous laundering, while personal cleanliness was meted out with a splash here and a scrub there. Yet, amid all this theatricality of hygiene, flourished a charming acceptance, an almost romantic winking at life's aromatic complexities. Chasing after cleanliness became a sort of unpinned badge of valor, or perhaps a futile rebellion against the inevitable yawn of earthly elements. Floating gently toward the cobwebbed gables of our minds, one can almost feel the embrace of time, bidding us to consider whether this incessant polish of modernity is indeed as soothing as we suppose. And as your eyes begin to close with the soft understanding of the past's warm embrace, rest assured, knowing there's more to discover just beyond this dreamy chapter, where old-timey adventures of grit and glory await our journey, weary souls. As twilight casts its gentle veil over the landscape, let us embark upon a journey through time to the washrooms, or lack thereof, of Regency England. In this chapter, dear listener, we shall delve into the delicate dance of personal hygiene, practiced with the elegance only the early 19th century could muster. Picture this: a sprawling English manor with all the charm of a Jane Austen novel. Yet, upon closer inspection, it reveals that water pipes wrestled more with concepts of cooperation than with actual plumbing. Thus, bathing in Regency England was an event similar to how we might host a dinner party, requiring planning, preparation, and occasionally a letter of apology in advance. While we bask in the convenience of modern showers, let us imagine the commitment required when bathing was considered an activity best enjoyed on special occasions, or, heaven forbid, when one failed to pass the sniff test. In a world dominated by embroidery, etiquette, and the occasional fleeing carriage, bathing was far from the daily ritual we know today. We must now salute the esteemed hip bath, a device so named not for its fashionable allure, but for its shape, lending just enough space for one to perch, and perch only, like a bird settling into its nest for the night. Utilitarian, compact and portable, the hip bath became a staple amongst those seeking the elusive tides of cleanliness amid the chaos of Regency living. Witness the orchestration of this symphony of cleanliness. The fireplace crackles, a steadfast kettle brimming with boiling water, held aloft by one of the household staff who also doubles as an auditory historian, knows exactly which floorboard creaks the loudest. They fill the bath with a practiced precision, alternating between streams of scalding and lukewarm water, as if sorting out brimming bowls of porridge for Goldilocks herself. But of course, no society would succeed without its unofficial code of good form. Ladies and gentlemen refreshed themselves at staggered intervals, taking turns when the waters chill matched the charm of a lingering English drizzle. Yet, in a grand gesture of gallant chivalry, or perhaps pragmatism, the head of the household had first dibs. Their triumphant exit signaled all others that the race to cleanliness was officially on, akin to the firing of a starter pistol at a Regency sports day. A rarely spoken yet keenly felt social pressure underscored the collective fear of being labelled a bit ripe, a term as gently critical as a tongue-in-cheek remark at a country ball. Soap came next, oozing with the distinct aroma of purifying lye and lovingly rigged with scents captured from a perfumed garden. Wooden soap dishes cradled each carefully carved bar as if they were sacred artifacts, transporting their users to realms of floral fragrance. Accoutrements for these ablutions varied. Some swore by the simplicity of a washcloth, while bolder souls might engage a loofah in combat, brandishing it as the ultimate weapon against impurities. Others turned to household alchemy, concocting cleansing potions with local herbs guaranteed to leave a sheen of mystery about them. Post-bath rituals extended beyond cleanliness. They were an opportunity to address Regency comfort-inspired fashion. Fresh linens awaited, white as a cautious dove, garments that bore silent witness to a multitude of societal constraints, yet remained miraculously supportive. With each layer donned, they padded attendees with an almost musical rustle, conductor of their own genteel melody. As candles flickered low like stars in the sky, the bathers emerged renewed, surely elevating local gossip and dance card placements alike. Ever the social occasion, news of who had taken a bath spread almost as quickly as the whisperings of who was to inherit Aunt Gertrude's porcelain pigs. And so, as the water in the tub cooled, another chapter of Regency bathing etiquette quietly closed, leaving behind a trail of damp towels and refreshed souls, ready once more to navigate the unpredictable waltz of social calls and tête-à-tête. As the day slips into slumber, prepare to discover an even deeper dive into the erroneous myths and marvels of Regency self-care rituals and the curious remedies that dance between the realms of magic and medicine. With a nod to nocturnal rest, we leave the echoes of water lapping at our thoughts, while the stage is set for even more captivating tales to follow. In the quaint drawing rooms of Regency England, while the ladies engaged in genteel rounds of needlepoint and the gentlemen pursued the noble art of buttoning intricate waistcoats, the topic of cleanliness would bob into conversations like an over-enthusiastic cork. One might say that for the English nobility of this era, bathing was as elusive and as rare as a good strawberry in winter. But let's saunter through the scented parlours, just a touch downwind if you please, and explore this peculiar relationship between genteel society and cleanliness. The Regency era, a time often romanticised for its rolling countryside and delicate social rituals, was strangely ambivalent, to use a polite Regency term, about personal hygiene. Not to say they ignored it entirely, heavens no, but the average English bibliophile or ballroom beauty might go an entire week without a full bath and think nothing of it. After all, it was widely suspected that copious bathing could weaken one's constitution, as if one might dissolve into a tepid puddle of oneself if exposed to too much soap and water. Instead, Becky and Benedict Welthington muffins, typical representatives of the era's elite, engaged in more measured approaches to cleanliness. Becky, wearing a dreamy muslin dress the colour of early morning mist, might daintily splash her face with a bit of rosewater, a morning ritual as light as her powdered cheeks. And Benedict, following the fashion of the day, would spruce up with a brisk rub-down of a damp cloth, having earned the nickname the Dashing Sponge. On more decadent occasions, these intrepid souls would experience a true bath, often involving the ceremonial filling of a tin tub in the middle of the drawing room. Large amounts of hot water would be carted from the kitchen by beleaguered staff members, who, if not given a raise, at least deserved a commendation for their physical prowess. The tub, a metallic cauldron promising steam and tranquility, was too small to truly recline in, so one was left to sit ramrod straight, listening to the echo of every ripple bouncing cheekily off the walls. These baths would be further elaborated should one visit a local spa or a bathhouse, seeking the mystic balm of the public soak. Such venues were the social melting pots of the time, where one could steep in heated pools of self-improvement alongside neighbours, acquaintances, and perhaps an amorous archbishop or two, all bound together by little more than goodwill and increasingly tepid water. Yet no discussion on Regency hygiene would be complete without a mention of the laundry. For if personal washing was an event of almost mythic rarity, the laundering of clothes was treated more like an Olympic sport. Tall mountains of fine garments would pile high, serving as physical evidence of each household's stature, broader than the ego of any duke, and whiter than the winter snows. The laundry was a communal endeavour, a grand narrative of scrubbing, drying and airing, set against the green backdrop of rolling estate lawns. And when the freshly laundered clothes returned, almost 3 parts pristine to 1 part slightly off, they provided a perfect cloak for the less frequent personal ablutions. With scents of lavender and starch permeating the air, one's attention might easily be diverted from any underlying human misdemeanors of hygiene. So there we have it, the Regency paradox, a charming world where the bath was as much a social statement as it was a cleansing activity. It showed that while these elegant men and women may not have been as squeaky clean as our modern sensibilities might desire, they navigated their world with a curious grace, embracing baths beloved both for their novelty and scarcity. With refreshed spirits and clothes to match, they waltzed their way through their day-to-day with an aplomb enviable to any history buff seeking sleep. Drift now into dreams of Regency balls and mysterious perfumed courtyards as we prepare to tiptoe into not what lies beneath the frock coats and bonnets, but rather the curious world of cosmetic sensibility, looming just a page away. As we find ourselves meandering through the cobblestone alleyways of Regency England, let us pause momentarily at the doorstep of an unassuming establishment, the humble bathing house. Picture it now, dear listener, in the gentle glow of the twilight, bustling with patrons, each with a yearning for cleanliness and perhaps a hint of scandal under the guise of social propriety. The bathing house, you see, was not merely a place to rinse away the day's considerable collection of dust and grime, but also served as an informal social club of sorts. Its patrons, eager for both immersion in water and in gossip, exchanged more than pleasantries amid the scent of lavender and rose-scented soaps. One could say it was a livelier version of a modern-day coffee shop without the coffee, but full of steamy intrigue. Consider now the fine gentlemen of the era, with their impeccable sartorial choices, waistcoats and top hats that seem to defy both gravity and common sense. You might surmise, quite accurately, that cleanliness was less a matter of personal desire than of public duty, lest one's social standing slip into a muddied abyss. So there they were, valiantly submerging in large wooden tubs, their mustachios quivering not from the chill of water, but from the quality of conversation hovering overhead. But let's not forget the ladies of the era, wrapped in layers of fabric and societal expectations. For them, entering the bathing house was akin to embarking on an odyssey, their corsets perhaps sighing in relief as they were momentarily liberated from their duties. It was a chance to cleanse not just the body, but the mind, indulging in whispered discussions of the latest fashion pamphlets and the ever-elusive Commodore, the eligible bachelors of the day. Yet, if you were a fly on the carefully wallpapered wall, or perhaps more likely, a moth, given the period, you'd notice something peculiar about the water itself. It was oftentimes shared, dear listener, in the spirit of economy and camaraderie. A particularly lively group might find themselves batting around soap suds as if they were entangled in a lively game of badminton, minus the rackets. But what of the inventive minds who saw the opportunity for improvement amidst this aquatic camaraderie? Enter the entrepreneurial spirits who peddled bath additives and enhancements. These were the precursors of bath bombs, promising not only aromatic indulgence but a hint of mysticism. Seawater transported mysteriously inland promised the invigorating embrace of oceanic adventure without the inconvenience of a soggy London fog. And yet, beyond the lively exchanges and strategic soaks, there lingered a quiet civility. A recognition that amidst the shared water and whispered tales, there was a universal human endeavor to attain a modicum of purity in an otherwise unpredictable world. For the briefest of moments, the hierarchy dissolved in the humble act of bathing. Dukes, duchesses, and dignitaries alike found themselves as equals, united in their pursuit of the elusive virtue of cleanliness. So, as you let your mind drift with the echo of splashes and the murmur of historical chatter, think about the shared experience of water back then, an early nod to the modern community pool, only filled with less chlorine and more character, if you will. As the last of the bathers emerged, their faces radiant with satisfaction, or at least less dusty, twilight faded into night, wrapping the city in a cloak of calm. With our own chapters aligning to a slow, mesmerizing close, might I delicately extend our whimsically soaked journey into the latticework of Regency life, with a soft pivot to other curious corners and corridors waiting for our inquisitive gaze. You see, dear listener, as in life, every end surely gestures towards a beginning. Picture yourself, dear listener, stepping gracefully into the year 1813, the perfumed heart of Regency England. Imagine straying into the hushed, dim serenity of a beautifully adorned drawing room, where shadows from the flickering candlelight flirt playfully upon flocked wallpaper and impossibly delicate porcelain figures. But rather than being fixated on the finery, let us turn our attention to an altogether more aromatic matter, the curious habits surrounding cleanliness and personal hygiene. As we find ourselves enveloped in the languid, lavender-scented air of this period, we might observe, to our amusement, that the people of Regency England were immersed in a paradox. On one hand, the well-heeled aristocrats swathed themselves in layers upon layers of sumptuous fabric, yet on the other, they found little time for the supposed luxury of an actual bath. Indeed, for most, the allure of water was in complete contrast to its scarcity. After all, a bath necessitated the lugging of heavy pails filled with water, laboriously heated over a hearth by servants who likely would rather apply their efforts toward more socially amusing pursuits like collecting lace cap patterns or the ever-popular art of judging the neighbors. The fortunate elite who owned a portable bathtub might engage in what one would generously refer to as a full bath, pneumatically arranged in their private chamber. Such a tub, a rare creature of wood or tin, was quite the masterpiece for its time. Nevertheless, it was somewhat comically sized, perhaps, best suited for a child or at most, a highly flexible adult who was adept at yoga long before its modern popularity. And so it was that many a lady and gentleman opted for sponge baths, with only the sacrificiously utilitarian parts given due attention. Imagine now the soap, a peculiar brick of substance that would firmly assert its presence, possibly attempting to remove not just dirt, but the user's epidermis as well. Made from aromatic concoctions of animal fat and lye, soap was available in a range of scents, from the mildly unpleasant to the practically overwhelming. Of course, this soap might also double as an effective bobsleigh for errant fleas, heroically hurled from one's coif by the evasive streak of a comb. It is here, in the midst of soapy mirth, that the powders and tinctures swoop in, elegantly obscuring aromas regarded today as distinctly signature. Both male and female enthusiasts of high society basked in clouds of talc and starch that, with a brisk puff, transformed any evidence of perspiration into mere rumors whispered among acquaintances. Hair, frequently subject to the attentions of these powders, acquired a texture reminiscent of puff pastry, bolstered by pins, nets, and no small amount of optimism. While rituals of surface hygiene abounded, dedicated establishments ballooned in popularity, offering their clientele a heady ensemble of services, from haircutting and tooth cleaning to the plucking of eyebrows with unwavering resolve. These establishments, predecessors to our modern salons, were social hubs where news could be exchanged, reputations built or dashed, and one's appearance charmingly, if not entirely practically, transformed. Oh, the intrigue, dear listener, shielded beneath hair, dusted in flour, and sporting a recently sharpened smile. A typical apothecary of the era would provide patrons with elixirs boasting benefits from toothpaste to hair restorers. Mind you, the discerning gentleman or gentlewoman might also find themselves the recipient of peculiar teas and herbaceous wonders believed to recalibrate one's internal humors. For truly, these potions tantalized even the most skeptical among them. This was, after all, an age of bold experimentation. If your neighbor's tonic emitted an effulgence sure to make paint peel, why? Perhaps there was something to it. With the image of these ever so elegant, yet hilariously aromatic individuals now tucked snugly into your mind, curl up with thoughts of exotic potions and fanciful hygiene rituals. Let questions of soap and sentiment float quietly, like the gentle descent of chamomile into your dreams, preparing you to move seamlessly into our next exploration, a path we shall amble together on our shared journey through the whimsical world that is Regency England. In the quaint and bustling precincts of Regency England, where society savoured the simply extravagant and extravagantly simple, bathing was rather like an understated ball. It was essential, but one wonders if everyone remembered that as they brandished their finest lace and linen between the infrequent soirees with soap and water. Oh yes, esteemed listeners, don your nightcaps, for this evening we plunge into the tub of cleanliness, or perhaps, dare I say, its elusive pursuit. Picture, if you will, the peculiar habits of the fine folk in their Regency attire, navigating the perplexing etiquette of cleanliness. While today, a mere stroll through Hyde Park would probably involve compulsory nose plugging at the mere thought of missing one's morning ablution. In the early 19th century, personal hygiene was an art of restraint and fragrance. The word on the street of Piccadilly was that purity indeed lay in not one's actions, but in one's aromatic discretion. Thus, where cleanliness might feasibly be next to godliness, it was surely always trailing closely behind a dab of rosewater cologne. Baths were a decidedly rare and momentous occasion, one that the family tub bore with a stoic perseverance. Pity the poor wooden basin biding its time until the water had finally cooled enough for Master Edward's turn, or worse yet, the last chore of the household maids. The ritual of your average Regency bath was a family affair, albeit one attended somewhat sparsely. It might involve the household drawing itself up to view a measly fortnightly affair where everyone, from the crustiest of old uncles to the tiniest tykes, partook of a single tub of the good stuff, sans filtering. While it sounds akin to bathing in the contents of last night's punch bowl, they seemed none too troubled by the arrangement. So evidently, it worked, in its own peculiar way. Soap, meanwhile, was a rare and cherished commodity, much like political restraint. While your standard bar of suds today might boast floral bouquets, Regency soap eschewed such frivolity, channeling a rather more practical palate. Crafted with simple lye and animal fats, it had all the sharpness of a headmaster's scolding, but without the undue charm. Forget sweet-smelling fragrances. Such concoctions might be used to wash floors or launder clothing, but haughty country house parlours stood with noses slightly higher than their suds when it came to sharing a square of it with one's vulnerable skin. The astute Regency citizen's mantra, then, was to remain unburdened by choice, with daily ablutions consisting largely of a quick mop of the face with a cloth. Should one find themselves in possession of an excess of time or creativity, a sponge bath would suffice, tauntingly hinting at the bliss of purity before retreating back into propriety. Now, as you adjust your fluffy pillows and let the rhythm of these words lull you, imagine the esteemed Jane Austen might chuckle at the thought of such bathing antics. Her heroes and heroines palpably adept at running about parlours and lawns. Seldom are they found diving toward a bathhouse. Perhaps Penny and Edward might flounce through decorum to gossip in rooms alive with the pitter-patter of rain against petticoats, utterly unperturbed by a smudge or two on their gleaming faces. Such cleanliness conundrums were not without their remedies. The enterprising citizen of yore donned themselves in linen, the Regency era's fabric of choice, sporting layers in a valiant effort to front their soap budgetary shortfalls, as well as a protective barrier against the inevitable smudges. Alas, the dance of Regency hygiene may seem antiquated and humorous in its cloak and dagger affair with cleanliness, yet one must softly tread in judgment, as fashions are but fleeting wisps of time. As your eyes begin to gently flutter shut, and visions of gowns and breeches gambol through your dreams, let us hold fast to the gentle wisdom imparted from this curious age. For all the frocks, face cloths, and fragrant attempts one might encounter, the spirit of cleanliness has always thrived in intention just as much as in practice. Now let us slowly drift on the tides of slumber to whatever tidings tomorrow holds, as our exploration of the Regency world inches ever so closer to fresh discoveries. In the cleansing adventure that was Regency England, washing one's body was, ironically, often not the sparkling highlight of one's week. Bathing, you see, was a practice approached with all the nonchalance of a cat with a bathtub, avoided and eyed suspiciously from a distance. But while they lived in an era when people committed disappearing acts on hygiene, the Regency folk did cherish the power of a good contradiction, taking great pride in keeping their clothes pristine, while their skin beneath was something of a whispered secret. Ah, the art of getting dressed in Regency England was the stuff of dreams, with linens, shifts, and stockings stacked like a 7-layer cake. Wearing freshly laundered garments seemed to serve as a magical spell, warding off the lingering effects of bodily odors. A clever, sinkered trick for anyone not in favor of getting dunked in a bath. Thus one could stroll about the village wrapped in a cloak of clean linen while secretly preserving the musky essence of life underneath. Now, when it came to the indulgent act of a full-on bath, brace yourself. It was often treated as a seasonal affair, like the summer solstice, or an unexpected heatwave in the middle of February. For many a Georgian gentleman or lady, the first thaw of spring meant a chance, nay, a reminder, to splash in some soapy water after a long winter of somber self-reflection and subtle self-neglect. It was a time of renewal, or perhaps just a brief aquatic interval amidst months of aromatic endurance. Yet, not everything was as stagnant as an abandoned teacup. For in the glossy pages of the era's high society, public bathhouses experienced a peculiar rising star moment, as did the invention of the portable bath. Imagine a lightweight contraption akin to an oversized soup pot into which one might whimsically fold themselves like a giant dumpling. Transportable by carriage, you could, in theory, travel across the countryside with your cleanliness appendage rattling reassuringly in the back. Then there were those exotic establishments of salubrious infamy, the pump rooms and spas, where the well-to-do could quench their odd thirst for water inside and out. Perhaps in a gilded chamber or atop a fragrant source of introduction-worthy spring water, you might find yourself immersed in an experience that, under the right circumstances, wouldn't be far too dissimilar from a jubilant dunking booth. Let us not forget those who bore true responsibility for any flickers of hygienic enlightenment, the inventors and mad scientists of cleanliness. While many men vigorously pondered science's great questions, like whether snuff would ever truly be on trend again, a precious few, such as the iconic William Feetham, whose patented shower mechanism tried its very best to alter humanity's relationship with water, did in fact create wet contraptions that had the potential to turn soap-dodging adults into born-again aquaphiles. Such contraptions ranged from the promising to the impractical, and each came with its share of possible mishaps. It was said that some of London's first showers stood ready to accost the unsuspecting with their erratic outpourings, leaving everyone, man, woman, and unsuspecting poodle alike, at the mercy of gravity's watery tantrums. Yet, with the pioneering spirit shared by curious human beings everywhere, a brave contingent of Regency folks daringly submitted to the elements. They eventually learned that sometimes fresh water might actually make life better, not create some mysterious ailment. While the practice of bathing began as a somewhat cautious and irregular agreement with cleanliness, cracking jokes as it slipped through the slippery shadows of society, it slowly but surely bathed the world anew. Oh, how soap and suds would sweep ashore on the waves of progress, preparing to reform many a dirty soul searching for salvation in the damp rituals of rainy days to come. And thus, the gentle truths of Regency England's curious approach to the act of washing began to wash away the dust of history, softly lulling us into the wistful tides of another tale, just waiting to be told under the calming veil of moonlit dreams. In the gentle glow of a Regency evening, where candlelight flickers across drawing rooms, casting enchanting, quivering shadows that dance with an almost mischievous delight, we find ourselves slipping silently into the curious world of cleanliness, or the lack thereof. Picture, if you will, Lady Euphemia Fortescue, possibly one of the aristocracy's more ardent admirers of what we might generously call a unique hygiene protocol. As she lounged in her settee, surely pondering the intricacies of ribbon embroidery, or perhaps the very essence of footman politics, her stance on bathing was decidedly laissez-faire. The prevailing Regency opinion favoured scents that wafted through the air, like the gentle lifting of Mozart notes at a summer lawn concert. Indeed, why trouble oneself with water when you could simply conjure floral clouds of lavender and rose to disguise your less than rosy reality? In this era, bathing wasn't merely about cleanliness. It was a leisurely endeavour needing a team of burly staff to drag a tub, not unlike a small boat, into one's room. But before we sail past, allow me to remind you, water wasn't just a turn of a tap away. Oh no, dear listener, water here was as hard-earned as a Regency compliment. It was hand-drawn from wells, painstakingly carried, and of course, heated with the zeal and enthusiasm of somebody preparing a royal feast. Now, Lady Euphemia might have been quite agreeable to the occasional face wash or a dab with a damp cloth. Yet, submerging one's entire person, this was an act of reckless determination reserved for mayhap the rainy seasons of the soul. As for shampoo, why, that was but a mysterious concoction whispered about by Parisian contemporaries in far-off lands. Among those who were slightly more daring with their ablutions was the singular Charles Wilburton, a gent whose bravery knew no bounds, apparently, even unto the bracing adventure of a bath. Capes billowing and monocle adjusted, Charles took to this hygienic endeavour, not weekly, not monthly, but dare we say regularly. His acquaintances often marveled at his audacious experiments with cleanliness, placing him firmly in the fabulous category of a bit unusual. And then we've the most fascinating case of the elusive John Edgeworth, a gentleman who endeavored to invent a contraption on which to perch himself, surrounded by steam, a sort of early sauna, minus the eucalyptus, if you will. Alas, his device met with misfortune when it emitted not steam, but unfathomable quantities of smoke, reminiscent of an overly exuberant bonfire. Nonetheless, his ingenuity was surely admired, if from afar. Yet, for all the brio of the bather, scents were the true stars of the hygiene show. Perfumeries prospered, creating fabulous concoctions designed to distract not only one's senses, but also one's neighbors. It was the golden age of scented pomades, tinctures, and delightful olfactory indulgences. A dab upon the wrist, a flick upon the neck, and you were suitably clothed in the most ephemeral of finery. So, dear listener, as you lie in restful anticipation of dreams soon to unfold, imagine the soft rustle of Regency taffeta and the heady, though sometimes overpowering bouquet of an era that favored flair over function. Settle into your soft bed with the knowledge that, with a bit of creative fragrance, anyone in the age of Jane Austen might be ready to endure the grandest of balls or the quietest of dinner parties. As the night deepens and you find yourself drifting ever so gently on the soft currents of your own dreams, remember there is ever more to uncover beneath this velvety cloak of time. Yet those tales await, whispering just beyond the horizon, as we drift into the soft glow of Regency England's intricate dance between soap and water. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy with the cozy warmth of knowledge. The year was somewhere confidently Victorian adjacent, yet distinctly Regency, period accuracy being less important than our pursuit of sleepy amusement. We unfurl this chapter like a freshly laundered dress, sharing the delightful quirks and occasional splashes of cleanliness that characterize this whimsically hygienic era. Picture yourself, if you will, as a guest of the esteemed Featherbottom family, an illustrious household renowned for their hilarious incompetence at keeping up with the trend of bath-taking, which had suddenly become all the rage amongst the genteel. The youngest Featherbottom, dear Ambrose, once famously mistook a footbath for a tureen of soup, much to the dismay of the dinner guests and to the great delight of some nearby ducks. In reality, bathing was a practice rarely indulged in by the people of Regency England. Much like the elusive dodo or the considerate London driver, a full-body soak in actual water was a rarity. Baths were initially viewed with the same skepticism one might reserve for a stranger who offers unsolicited hugs. Yet as legend of their supposed benefits spread, tubs were eventually dragged indoors, albeit with reluctance and many a creaky floorboard. For those homes bold enough to welcome a permanent fixture for bathing, the copper tub became an emblem of luxurious sanitation. These tubs, big enough to generously swaddle a full-grown dandy or host a round of duck bobbing at the neighborhood fair, were a logistical triumph. An entire brigade of servants was sometimes needed to cart them to the hearth, lest an unintentional cold plunge induce a bout of tinny shivers or, heaven forbid, cleanliness. Of course, there was the minor inconvenience of heating the water, requiring enough coal to fuel a small steamship. After much perspiration and debate, the average Regency bath was less of a spa treatment and more of a logistical challenge, closely resembling a military operation. Instructions such as, "Do not, under any circumstances, jostle the tub," were commonly issued, like a mantra repeated for luck and hot water retention. Observe the clever and cumbersome devices of the time, from portable showers that resembled inverted umbrellas to toothpaste recipes involving ash and salt. Think of them as early attempts at artisanal wellness, best marketed to sleepy historians. Indeed, soap itself was undergoing a renaissance, evolving from a harsh reminder of skin abrasion to something mildly less scandalous. Perfume scents, delightful to the nose, were incorporated, helping to ensure that even if one was not completely clean by modern standards, at least one's aroma could be lightly floral. Glimpse now the inventive use of linen, a fabric as quintessential to cleanliness as it was confusing to fashion. Residents of the Regency believed in the magical transference of dirt from skin to cloth. Cities of linens colonized soiled regions with the hope of persuading dirt to abandon its human hosts. Believe it or not, this practice enjoyed a unique kind of success, even as it made a good case for investing in bleached cotton futures. Meanwhile, at the morning market, street vendors would enthusiastically hawk their wares of tooth powders, soaps, and occasionally dubious lotions with claims that would stretch modern labeling laws like a corset on a corpulent sideboard. Crowds would gather, but once pruned and buffed slightly beyond recognition, many a gentleman might gaze into mirrors and see a new visage staring back, even if only slightly less encumbered by yesterday's dust. As the gentle rhythm of history lulls us to sleep, we are reminded of the whimsical absurdities that make Regency Hygiene such a fascinating bedtime story. While not perfect by today's standards, their earnest effort reminds us of a satisfying soak in the warm waters of nostalgia. As you drift into dreams, let your mind wander to the next tale just over the horizon. There are whispers of curious dinner parties and even more curious appetites. But for now, keep snug in the embrace of your own dusty thoughts, letting the waves of history bathe you in gentle relaxation. Ah, the inimitable charm of Regency England, a time when elegance and wit cavorted like twin sisters at a ball, and when bathing customs were, shall we say, still finding their footing in that delicate dance of hygiene. Let us meander through the murky waters of bathing history, accompanied by the gentle glow of a candle and the faint rustle of a chambermaid preparing yet more warmed water, because nothing quite said pampered like dips in a lukewarm concoction weekly or thrice yearly, depending on one's views of excess. Imagine our typical Regency gentleman, for instance, whose morning routine involved a bit of splish-splashing in a shallow bowl, quaintly stationary upon a wooden stand. This basin, filled to the brim with frigid water, was just the thing to dash any drowsiness away and hopefully dredge off any vestiges of the previous day's grime. Though not too aggressively mind, for overindulgence in cleanliness could be regarded as unnecessary zealotry. One might choose to ensconce oneself in a complete bath, but wasn't that reserved for special occasions or royal mandates? The bowl, thus, was an acceptable nod to grooming, seasoned with the farce of modern understanding. More adventurous souls might immerse themselves in a proper bathtub, albeit with some cautious evasion of public bathhouses. A flourishing scene, one might add, that vintage satire enjoyed lampooning as more social playground than serious scrubbing centre. To bathe or not to bathe could well have been another Hamlet soliloquy regarding the advantages of privacy or perhaps the aesthetic worth of bubbles. Regency England may not have boasted hot water on tap, but it certainly nurtured a budding theatre of human interactions. And let us not overlook the aromatics of it all. Scented soaps, made ever rarer by high costs, as enduring as rare wines, aging in a curious stew of practicality and perfumery, swirled seductively in the waters of those noble few who could afford such extravagances. For most, a homemade concoction of lion animal fats complemented their ablutions, a fragrance passed down through generations with an olfactory signature recognized across the land. Nothing quite like the piquancy of eau de farmhouse to announce one's arrival or impending presence in polite society. No discussion of Regency hygiene would be complete without a nod to the rural myth that a brush with water might invite ill health. Was it malarkey, myth, or something just on the periphery of probable? The jury in Regency England was divided as unceremoniously as the soap bubbles of a frothy bath. It's believed that many, a curious mix of the squeamish and the blasé, downplayed soap's role, attributing good health instead to a layer of good old earth, sturdy and unyielding like the British spirit. Indeed, bathing in the Regency period was like hosting an old friend, done occasionally, savoured in moderation, seldom discussed upon departure. Bathing was nothing if not philosophical, as though one's very soul were being submerged alongside their outer grime. And was there anything more delightfully British than to consider one's very humanity while wrestling with the challenge of cleanliness? If we were to scrape through time with a loofah, we'd find there's quite a bit left behind, a testament to the beauty of what lay beneath. Let us, then, quietly close the door on this alluring liquid-scented chapter of history, leaving the faint echo of splashes and the scented whispers of bygone bubbles in our wake. And as we take leave of the suds and ceremonies of Regency bathing habits, we gingerly step toward the next gentle ripple in the annals of our tales unfolding, in the dreamy vale of Regency England, where elegance waltzed with etiquette. One might assume that bathing was as regular a pastime as writing poetry by moonlight. Alas, dear listener, expectations and reality often took divergent paths, like a bewigged dandy in a crooked cravat. Picture a society that dined with sterling silver and danced in opulent ballrooms, yet viewed water with the same suspicion they reserved for overly charming footmen. To bathe or not to bathe was a question that vexed many a noble household. Enter the absurdity of a Regency bath, a splendid chance for misadventure disguised as hygiene. At the center of this aquatic aficionado's quagmire was the bathtub, often a cumbersome fixture requiring more logistics than a military maneuver. It was no small task to summon scalding water from afar, trough carried by industrious servants who, by day's end, likely looked upon the tub as a rival rather than a routine duty. Bathing in those days was not the private sanctuary one might suppose. Picture a bustling upstairs chamber where water sloshed, steam curled like ghostly dancers, and ladies in waiting stood ready, with soaps fragrant enough to mask the aroma of roast beef lingering from dinner. But the water was not always pristine. A curious thing, feng shui enthusiasts of the time believed in saving water rather than refilling the tub afresh. This meant that whoever bathed first enjoyed the crystalline clarity of mountain springs, while the last in line embraced waters of questionable vintage and opaque wisdom. The act itself was a delicate dance, more a dabble than a dive, lest one inadvertently offend modesty or decorum. And heaven forbid an agile toe should upset the delicate surface tension, or perish the thought. Splash precious, ape water upon polished floors. Such mishaps would surely result in a scandal that would ripple through society faster than a duchess could misplace a bonnet. Regency bathers reveled in their own audibility, accompanied by a chorus of squeaky floorboards and the musical clinking of delicate soap dishes, the symphony of the unwashed elite. And should one need a remedy for an ailment such as having a perfectly normal Tuesday, a multitude of concoctions awaited. Salts, herbs, and oils blended with creativity, offering solace and leaving an occasional bather reminiscent of a finely seasoned roast. Despite this curious attachment to cleanliness bred by paranoia and perfumes, it must be noted that for some, bathing retained its place as a great luxury. A grand event, their tales of bathing were told with the reverence owed to a prized yew tree in a neatly trimmed garden. "Oh, to bathe but once a fortnight," they might exclaim, their eyes twinkling with mischief. Such decadence! As the evening light begins to fade and Regency England retreats into your dreams, remember this. Cleanliness was, more than anything, a curious choice, a delight or a duty, approached with the same balance of wit and whimsy that defined its people. And with the lingering scent of saponaceous whispers in your mind, it feels only right to gently close this bathroom door, stepping quietly into another chapter of bygone elegance, in the dimly lit drawing rooms of Regency England, where ladies wore gossamer gowns and gentlemen sported tailored waistcoats. A most peculiar conundrum bubbled beneath the surface. Quite literally so if you happen to drop your lorgnette into a hastily drawn bath. Yes, dear listener, tonight we embark on a rather sudsy exploration of cleanliness, or the lack thereof, in the early 19th century. During this time, the British Isles were awash, though perhaps awash is too generous a word, with an understanding of hygiene that could be described as, at best, sporadic. In this epoch of ingenuity, the notion of cleanliness was still taking its tentative first steps, much like a gentleman after an especially enthusiastic evening at the local tavern. Imagine, if you will, a typical Regency household. The heart of their ablutions lay in the utilitarian washstand, a versatile piece of furniture that facilitated the delicate art of the sponge bath. A fine porcelain basin and ewer, adorned with floral patterns or perhaps a sophisticated pastoral scene, served as the centerpieces of this process. The act of washing oneself was often a private affair, as private as one could be when relying on a routine involving more splashing than scrubbing. Soap, that slippery little bar of human innovation, was available but not universally trusted. Oftentimes it was of dubious quality, made chiefly from animal fat and wood ash, creating a lather more akin to lumpy broth than anything we might recognize as luxurious foam. Those of some means might indulge in a bar scented with lavender or rose, though one would do well to avoid the cheaper brands, lest they leave your skin feeling as though you'd had a close encounter with an ambitious hedgehog. Delving into the communal spaces of Regency society, one would find that public bathhouses were not quite the bustling hubs of hygiene you might envision. These establishments were about as common as dragon sightings and often provided a spa-like experience only if your notion of a spa included dubious plumbing and questionable water quality. Instead, most individuals, when they did engage in more comprehensive washing rituals, opted for tin or wooden tubs that could be dragged before the hearth, turning the quaint act of bathing into an evening spectacle worthy of a Jane Austen novel. The gentry, in all their elegant frock-coated glory, might venture to indulge in the pleasures of a water cure. These therapeutic retreats promised bodily renewal through various hydrotherapies and emerged as popular amongst those who preferred their bath water with a side of pseudoscience. Picture the Regency elite lounging by the seaside in Bath or Cheltenham, braving the elements for a taste of invigorating mineral waters, sipping from dainty cups while discreetly hoping to avoid any encounter with the town's more aromatic residents. It might amuse you to consider the difference between city dwellers and country folk when it came to their bathing habits. In the sprawling metropolises, where the fog hung thick enough to chew, the affluent had access to plumbing that would trickle water into their residences. Trickle being the operative word. Meanwhile, those nestled in the countryside relied on the abundance of rivers and streams, transforming the great outdoors into nature's own spa, algae and all. One must admire their fortitude as they emerged from these rustic bathing sessions refreshed, if not slightly chilled, and perhaps with an uninvited tadpole as a souvenir. As the candlelight dances softly upon the walls of our historical reverie, you might now wonder how often our Regency friends took to these watery practices. Alas, daily bathing was the stuff of myth and legend, much like running into a unicorn whilst taking a morning constitutional. The general consensus leaned toward a more casual approach, perhaps weekly if one was particularly ambitious or had fallen into a mud puddle during a spot of light afternoon constitutional. And so, as we gently close this chapter of Regency cleanliness, allow your thoughts to drift toward dreams scented with lavender and rose water, and imagine yourself bathing under the stars by the gentle glow of the firelight. Rest now, as our story softly carries you forward, as fresh as a daisy and as sound as a slumberous nightingale, into the next dreamy tale of historical curiosity. Whisper now, weary travelers of slumber, as we sneak into the subtly perfumed corridors of Regency England, where the very art of cleanliness becomes a most curious dance. Picture, if you will, a society perched on the delicate balance of propriety and personal fragrance, a world where bathing was less of a habit and more of an occasional affair, much like a reluctant guest at a regular Monday morning meeting. In the grand ballrooms and drawing rooms of the early 19th century, personal hygiene played second fiddle to silk waistcoats and fashionable bonnets. People bathed far less frequently than we might today, which invites the mind to ponder, did the Duchess's delicate floral scent derive from blossoms, or perhaps something rather more alchemical? Yes, dear listener, there was indeed a prevailing belief that one could cleanse one's mortal vessel adequately with a dainty damp handkerchief, banishing grime with a polished flick rather than a soapy splash. Fastidiousness met its match in floral absences. Baths were often elaborate affairs draped in ceremony, Envision the middle-class gentleman, earner of shillings, orchestrating his own private opera of watery indulgence. His tin tub, a cast-iron emblem of opulence, awaits in the center of the family washhouse, or perhaps reluctantly shared within the warmth of the kitchen, as the ceremonial heating of water swirls about him like preludes to a most lukewarm crescendo. Minutes later, scrubbed bare of vestments and fortified through steamy sacrifice, he engages cautiously with the water, navigating with the grace of a porpoise, indulging in a modestly extravagant puddle. Soap, fabulous yet finicky stuff, played its own slippery role upon the stage. The savvy advertisers of the day oft dabbled in ambitious claims, suggesting their soap could render both skin and soul as pure as freshly fallen dew. But in practice, the products were an erratic lot, running the spectrum from gently encouraging healthful vigor to encouraging enthusiastic exfoliation due to abrasively gritty fervor. For women, immersing oneself in water was often considered a purview of the most determined. The adventurous among them might briefly opt for a dip in the sea, but fear not. Off the coast, those grand bathing machines rolled gracefully like seaside chariots drawn by the ocean's embrace. Modesty carefully escorted these ladies to splash in sequestered sanctity, while their attendant horses rested, bemused and damp. Perchance aromatic oils and flower petal potions from faraway lands, often costing no small fortune, enhanced these aqueous rituals, hinting at an international meeting between Cleopatra and the comforting scent of lavender sachets from London. Yet not everyone partook of such exotic delights. The simple folks prayed their scents would rise from fresh air and hardy constitution. Behold the bravery of the unbathing, surviving in blissful ignorance framed by heavy perfumes, which bravely battled against nature's own eye-popping emanations. Beyond the simple act of bathing was, of course, the genteel art of laundry, an affair as intriguing as any. Regency laundresses were masters of transformation, plying their trade with furious petticoat flicks and expert sheets, starching out status in every fold. They conquered the grayscale expanse of garment cleanliness, promising white as snow or your sooty shadows cheerfully returned, victorious in their linen escapades. As each succeeding soak in the saga of hygiene reveals itself, we come to appreciate those Regency souls who danced on the edge of cleanliness and revelation, navigating with due respect to their olfactory fellows. The resilience, drank through bowls of lavender-infused water and rose-scented dreams, painted an era where societal grace was as much about adaptation as it was about presentation. Let us slip away now, warmed by these gentle currents of tradition and toil, into the next chapter of our shared sleepy history. Rest assured, dear listeners, there's more to discover on our journey through the mysteries and the mundane, chewin of yesteryear's ablutions. Until we convene yet again in whispered tones of yawn-stifled intrigue, amidst the cobblestones and gentle hubbub of Regency England, where the pulse of society throbbed like the distant drumming of teacups on saucers, a marvelous invention began to gather steam, quite literally. It was known as the bath, an item of curiosity and, occasionally, scandalous novelty. Picture a wooden tub standing nobly in the middle of an elegant boudoir, filled with steaming water and, to some extent perhaps, bubbles if one were feeling particularly princely. There it was, a solitary vessel of hygiene and warmth, inviting its user to abandon both grime and decorum. The intricacies of Regency bathing culture were as layered as the frothy cravats worn by gentlemen attending a soiree. It seems that while everyone fancied the idea of cleanliness, the process involved could become quite the logistical conundrum. To delve into this delightful puzzle, we must begin with a rather famous bathing pioneer, one Beau Brummel, who dared to make bathing fashionable and not merely functional. Beau Brummel, dashing and infamous for his sartorial acumen, purportedly heralded in the era of the daily bath. As legend has it, he proclaimed his ritual with the nonchalance of a man ordering a second dessert. Imagine the astonishment amongst his peers as he insisted on bathing with alarming frequency, not once a week, but by Jove, each day. His insistence on cleanliness was considered curious, like a peacock dwelling amongst pigeons. This daily immersion necessitated the assistance of several staff members, who would haul buckets of cold water up narrow staircases and then laboriously heat it over a fire. After the water reached a suitable temperature, it was decanted into the tub like a delicate potion to bewitch the unwary. Surely, the household staff must have marveled at Brummel's demand for this liquid luxury. His peculiar habits were discussed in hushed, airy tones and, one assumes, fueled the gossip that spread quicker than a goose on the loose. Baths themselves were a silent rebellion against the traditional modes of cleaning oneself, a method involving little more than a dabblings with a damp cloth and a spritz of perfume, the Regency equivalent of a hasty tidying up before guests arrived. The tub, however, was an embrace of lavishness and serenity, a full plunge into cleanliness rather than a tentative toe dip. As the idea of regular bathing took hold, even medical professionals found themselves in a frothy debate. Some endorsed bathing as revitalizing and conducive to health, while others warned of its imagined perils. Too hot, and you might faint dead away. Too cold, and you risked inviting a nasty case of the shivers. One might add that shivering was not ideal, especially when coupled with chilly ceramic tiles. Resplendent baths adorned the homes of the wealthy, sometimes with the addition of elaborate fixtures like brushes and sponges crafted from sea creatures who, unbeknownst to them, had found themselves part of an aristocratic bathing ritual. Water, however, remained a cunningly scarce commodity in places like London, carted around town by entrepreneurial watermen, each carrying a portable ocean in wooden barrels. As nighttime embraced the bustling city streets and the last of the coaching carriages clattered by, perhaps a starlit night would see families stand guard over washtubs in the kitchen, ready to scrub away the remnants of the day with ferocious determination. While not quite in line with Brummel's opulent practices, it was their own steamy voyage into clarity. Each bubble, popping in a warm bath, could carry a wistful wish or a disappearing dream, as the inhabitants of Regency England navigated a world where the boundaries between cleanliness and indulgence softly blurred. The ritual of bathing evolved to mean something more than mere sanitation. It was an opportunity for a quiet escape, an embrace of the warmth we all seek at the close of day. In the gentle stirrings that accompany thought's soft descent into dreams, another question lingers on the horizon. In a world teetering on the cusp of innovation, what other aspects of daily life might find themselves subjected to whimsy and revolution? Nestled deep in the nebulous folds of Regency England, where society was a meticulous dance of etiquette and elegance, lies the peculiar topic of underclothing, or rather, the curious lack thereof. You see, my dear listener, the Regency era was a time of remarkable contrasts, where sophistication and, let's say, ventilation mingled in an oddly harmonious fashion under the layers of sartorial splendor. Venture with me, if you will, into the vestiges of a well-to-do lady's boudoir. There, enveloped in gossamer whispers of silks and muslins, our heroine stands before a wardrobe, rather sparing in its contents. For beneath the glorious, flowing empire waistgowns that defined the era, women wore shockingly little. Today's abundance of undergarments would seem an overabundant nuisance in comparison to the delicate chemises and stays of our Regency predecessors. The chemise, a thin, knee-length garment, acted as a precursor and a modest barrier between skin and the slightly more rigid undergarments. With nary an underpant in sight, yes, my dear friend, you heard rightly, women of the time eschewed this particular item. No knickers to muddle with, allowing any errant late-night snack loads to maintain a swift escape route. Instead, they wore stays, not quite the tortuous corsets of the Victorian period, mind you, but lightly boned bodices that gently coaxed posture into its proper place and nudged curves into a semblance of compliance. One mustn't overlook the petticoats, layers of frothy fabric adding volume and, one might say, a last line of defense against untamed drafts. As with all things Regency, the petticoat was more than function. It was a neat, artful dance of delicacy, fluttering with every elegant step across those poorly heated floors. Ah, the trials of fashion. Now for the gentlemen who surely thought themselves quite the picture of manliness, the story was equally fascinating. Their attire beneath the frock coats and tailored trousers often included a shirt long enough to serve dual purposes, functioning both as sleepwear and daywear. For those of practical disposition, the neckcloth or cravat doubled as a convenient napkin or, in dire straits, a makeshift bandage, truly a marvel of multitasking. Breeches reigned supreme until the more relaxed pantaloons took center stage, all held snugly in place by braces, suspenders for our friends across the pond. Not so different from a modern-day embrace, if you will. These braces served their purpose with gentlemanly aplomb, ensuring there were no unwanted distractions from the downward shift of gravity. It is here we must pause and pay homage to the fine art of laundry, for while undergarments may have been sparse, the cleaning thereof was an Herculean task. Without our modern conveniences, each piece was a labor of love, laundered by hand and returned to its pristine state with a devotion that could put many a romantic poet to shame. Imagine the scene at the washhouse, bustling with activity, from tub washers sloshing away to gossiping laundresses threading tails as quickly as they hung linens on the line. For these stalwarts, even the most delicate embroidery was no match, leaving them to chuckle at the prospect of a Regency stain, merely an excuse to engage in their well-practiced craft. So, as the moonlight bathes the silhouettes of our Regency figures in its gentle glow, we can't help but marvel at their resilient gracefulness. Let us tuck this lovely rib of history into the pocketbooks of our thoughts as we prepare to meander further into the curiosities of this fascinating era. Allow your eyelids to hang heavy as lavender-scented breezes dance through your dreams, promising more tales of yore where history and humor collide in the chapters still to come. In the twilight of Regency England, while society danced to the rhythm of lavish balls and soirees, another quieter, less glamorous art form unfolded behind closed doors. The endeavor to maintain personal cleanliness in a world determined to sully the effort. Picture, if you will, a dandified gentleman, resplendent in his waistcoat and cravat, yet embroiled in an epic battle, not with saber or wordplay, but with soap and water. Yes, dear listener, we are about to embark on a sudsy exploration into the fastidious process of bathing, Regency style. Now, before you imagine Parisian salons or Roman-style spas, temper your expectations. Generally, bathing was more of a makeshift puzzle rather than a lavish splash. Water was fetched laboriously, heated with painstaking patience, and cooled with the resigned acceptance of life's frigid realities. Indeed, it was more common to partake in what they charmingly dubbed a wash, a genteel procedure involving a basin, some lukewarm water, and a ragged semblance of a towel. Such was the modest prologue to Hygiene's peculiar play. Enter the soap, gallantly aromatic with a dubious whiff of lye. Yes, soap was a concoction of caustic character, offering an exfoliation experience that even the stoutest skin battled bravely against. Still, those who wielded it with flair were often prepared for social elevation, at least to the ranks of the reasonably odor-free. It was a fragrant ambition, pursued with the enthusiasm of knights seeking grails, lukewarm bathwater notwithstanding. For those fortunate enough to indulge in actual baths, visions of regal soaks in majestic tubs must be tenderly set aside. Instead, the experience closely resembled residing in a large kettle with constant tending required to ensure the right temperature and depth to prevent an accidental voyage into the murkier aspects of a waterlogged existence. Attendants scuttled back and forth, ensuring the water remained an acquaintance less inclined to cool resentment. And let us not forget those resilient souls who patronized the public bathhouses. These shared spaces, reverberating with the mingling conversations and mutual splashes of determined bathers, provided not just a venue for cleanliness, but a ground for social congress. It was said that in the steam of such places, one might find more political intrigue and social posturing than at a royal dinner dance, though probably with a little less grace and a little more humidity. Despite these cheerful efforts, cleanliness was, quite candidly, a complex endeavor. one that often faced competing priorities, such as the pervasive aversion to bathing too frequently. There was, among the populace, a widespread fear that too much water might open the body's pores to all manners of mischief, inviting ailments with a hospitality more abundant than Bath's own illustrious waters. But, as the story of cleanliness in Regency England unfolds, so too does the realization that even the humblest of washing endeavors held its own charm. It was in these small acts of refreshing reprieve, amidst the steamy interludes and frugal ablutions, that individuals clung to vestiges of refinement and respectability. It provided a relaxed resolve against the tumultuous odors of urban life, sculpting each bather into an unsung protagonist in the long, leisurely saga of cleanliness. As we drift away from the tranquil bathhouses and basin rituals, contemplating the gradual rinse and repeat of these historic practices, perhaps there lurks a gentle revelation that beneath the frills and froth of Regency regality, there beat a heart engaged in an ordinary yet venerable quest for a cleanliness that transcended the mere surface. This exploration now prepares to quiesce and wrap itself warmly in the thoughts of life, lather, and the law that binds them. We are, dear listener, soon to turn a gentle corner where the candles of a new chapter flicker softly, casting a glimmering invitation to partake in the next shared, slumbered-soaked tale of old. In the candlelit shadows of Regency England, beneath the heavily embroidered curtains, and amongst an abundance of knickknacks that would make any minimalist faint, the matter of bathing slipped through society like an unexpected draft. Now, imagine, if you will, our round-faced Mr. Thaddeus Figginsbottle, a gentleman of utmost propriety, finding himself in the peculiar situation of contemplating a bath, a rarity as notable as spotting a dodo bird ambling down St. James's Street. As water sloshed extravagantly into the wooden tub in his drawing room, inconveniently placed next to a rather imposing grandfather clock, Mr. Figginsbottle regarded the arrangement with the same skepticism reserved for a peculiar French dish. The idea of bath time in the Regency era was a theatrical event rather than a mere cleansing routine, involving an almost comedic choreography of furniture rearrangement and water-fetching theatrics. On this particular occasion, servants scuttered around like industrious ants, their arms laden with steaming kettles. Those who were privileged enough to enjoy such aquatic luxuries did so sparingly, for it was a thought shared amongst the elite that too much water upon one's noble skin could invite all manner of ailments and maladies. The fear of these often imaginary conditions was as strong as the English love for tea. One such malady, known unspecifically as the vapors, was a popular diagnosis for anything from a fainting spell to a bout of flatulence. Naturally, bathing too frequently could only heighten these dangers. Once the bath water had been appropriately warmed to a temperature designed to mimic a tepid Devonshire day, Mr. Figginsbottle dipped his toe with all the caution befitting a practiced snake charmer. A good bath was an orchestration of subtleties and timing. Linger too long, and the threat of wrinkling loomed large, a fear second only to excessive moisture syndrome, a concoction of the imagination likely produced by the same minds that created inkblot tests for the stressed Regency intellect. Ladies of the time had their own peculiar bathing practices, enveloped in a veil of floral scents and delicate rituals. Unlike Mr. Figginsbottle, who approached bathing with the measured dread of a man facing his tax collector, ladies often immersed themselves in perfume rather than water, their toilette tables bearing resemblance to well-stocked apothecaries rather than places of cleanliness. A spritz here, a dab there. Bathing was less about soap and more an elaborate game of olfactory illusion. It should be noted, dear listener, that bathing customs were not without their regional discrepancies. In some industrious and scandalously modern areas of England, innovative souls had begun experiments with indoor plumbing. Whispers of this mysterious technology spread slowly, like ripples in a pond, mostly greeted with the same skepticism reserved for gypsies and astrologists. Our friend Mr. Figginsbottle certainly never pondered such outre concepts as hot water on tap. His thoughts drifted instead to the importance of wearing the most magnificent attire after emerging from his wooden pool. For presentation, after all, was half the battle in proper society. Vestiges of the bath fashionably oblivious. Weaving through these watery narratives were the enduring concerns of soap, a substance as contentious as well-buttered scones. Was it lye-based, lavender-infused, or an imported Parisian concoction with a price tag hefty enough to set your periwig askew? Our avid bather, Mr. Figginsbottle, perhaps due to his sense of nationalism or simple thrift, preferred the robust appeal of the English bar, a decision which, while not necessarily fashionable, kept his household content in its familiarity. As Mr. Figginsbottle emerged, unscathed and slightly pruny, one could only imagine the tales these walls could tell, if only walls were prone to gossip. But in lieu of such revelations, the gleaming tub was dismantled, water emptied, towels hung. The clock ticked on, unfazed, as if to say, tomorrow is another day, perhaps another bath. As the chamber settled into a peace only found in the dreamiest corners of English homesteads, Mr. Figginsbottle withdrew under the layers of his quilt, a man now refreshed, perhaps by something more profound than water itself, a concept of cleanliness, if not purely of the body, then of the restful mind. And so, with dreams infused with giggles from the maid and the crow of a questioning rooster from a nearby farm, we too must rest, patiently awaiting the dawn of one more Regency revelation. As twilight descended upon Regency England, one might have wondered what on earth these well-bred aristocrats did before they took to their beds, each looming, four-poster sanctuary draped in yards of sumptuous fabric, quite the opposite of the humble sheets many of us know today. Well, dearest listener, allow me to regale you with a final curious installment of our exploration into the world of washing, or occasionally the art of appearing clean without the bothersome business of water. Picture a grand estate, its silhouette underlined against the fading light. Inside, the master of the house considers whether another night might pass without the ceremonial splash of tepid water meeting skin. Such was the decision of many a gentleman of the age. Fear not, for we aren't leaving you with tales of horrid pungency. These fellows had discovered something dazzling: perfume and powder. Yes, these fragranced heroes stepped in where water dared not tread. Quintessential concoctions of rosewater or lavender were splashed with moderate enthusiasm. Strangely, wearing more lace than logic dictated sensible, these men swaggered through ballrooms, seeked nary a brow furrowed by their puzzling approach to personal hygiene. Now, just as dreamy ladies were performing their own quaint ablutions at their lavish vanities, who could blame them for sparing the full bath experience for less frequent visits? A decision based on a mutual disdain of icy water and an aversion to cumbersome preparation. The dedicated task of hauling enough water into a copper tub was more than a simple evening pastime. So, with careful delight, our regal ladies employed a thorough scrub using flannel or muslin cloths, ensuring sanitary satisfaction with a far lesser aquatic demand. Venturing beyond the stately manors to the bustling towns, bathhouses beckon those with adventurous spirits and a desire to forgo the clamour of their washing bowls. With atmospheric steam and an inviting aroma, these establishments were more social sanctuaries than hygiene facilities. Patrons partook in gossip as a soothing blend of steam and exotic oils wafted around them, simultaneously sanitizing bodies and softening tongues for the exchange of scandalous stories. Elsewhere, untouched by engineered hot baths, our deer hunting gentlemen could take solace in the brisk outdoor activities that Regency life had to offer. Wouldn't a march through the thick hedgerows, seeking exhilarating sport, boast an equally engaging aroma, a testament to their rugged pursuits as splendid musk of masculine charm? But let's pause and drastically change course to the quaint wisdom nestled in an unexpected corner of this society, where some knew more than most, teetering on the avant-garde of personal grooming. The inventors amongst them devised wonders like early soap, albeit with the fillings of the common kitchen cupboard. But even here, the cautious soul feared their invention might cleanse them just a tad too much, lest they scrub away the layer that kept sinister miasmas at bay. Alas, in this whimsical world of Regency cleanliness, bathing was as much a philosophical discourse as a practice. Was it necessary to immerse the entire body? Was removing the visible soot not enough? Or did they dare challenge the societal norm, succumbing to such indulgence as a full bath, as unthinkably radical as wearing breeches without a polished wig? As the moon invited a hush across the verdant countryside, it cradled our gentle characters in a serene embrace, a cozy reminder of how Regency England, with its quizzical hygiene habits and charmingly aromatic predicaments, offered a living tapestry rich with life, love, and the occasional aroma of lavender mingling with adventure. Tonight, as you drift into that same timeless realm of dreams, perhaps you might find yourself amidst one of those grand soirees, scent of petals in the air, floating through those elegant, powder-filled parlors, a whisper of history passing the night. With a hesitant close of the eyes, let the echoes of Regency etiquette cradle you to sleep, in the charming knowledge that eras may come and go, but the narratives and curious quirks will forever weave the fabric of time, knitting the past into the comforting blanket of your dreams. So for now, listen as the gentle rustle of night folds around you, caressing you into a restful slumber beneath the softest comfort of history's embrace.